Hello everyone. Just getting last few things kind of settled, and then we'll wait and start. If you're here, say hi in the comments. Anybody have any exciting plans for this weekend? Oh, hi Tina. Thank you for joining. No plans other than working on cards. Same. I am in the same boat. Although, my husband's birthday is on Monday, so maybe we'll do something fun this weekend. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes, see if more people hop on. If not, we can get started. Hope he has a happy birthday. Thank you, Tina. I'll let him know. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So today I wanted to play along with using the stained glass rose stencil, and I want to use it a few different ways just to, you know, break out of my comfort zone and try some kind of new techniques. So first I started by, I wanted to make kind of an elegant background that was very simple but textured. So first I started by making this kind of embossed and ink blended background. You can tell that it's embossed more whenever it's flipped over. And all I did to create that is I laid the stencil down over my paper, as usual technique. Ooh, let's line it up here. And then, oh, there we go. And then I used some pixie spray to, you know, adhere it. And I also used some kind of tape to tape down the sides, and then to emboss in my die cutting machine with the stencil, all I did was I used the plate recipe for my Cuttlebug. I don't have a silicone mat for my other die cutting machine, so I used kind of the base plate, your two normal plates that you'd probably use for your die cutting, and then the silicone mat between them, and then you just put the paper and the stencil right on top of the silicone mat. And then you just run it through your die cutting machine a couple times. And that's how you create the embossed look with a stencil. Oh, and then once I created the embossed look with the stencil, I didn't remove the stencil kind of like I did. I left the stencil on, and then I took some Fired Brick Distress Oxide ink, and I went over it with an ink blending brush to kind of create the two-toned look, with the lighter color is where it's ink blended. And then the darker red is the regular red cardstock. So that's how I created the embossed background. So we're going to set that aside. So what I kind of wanted to do on top of the embossed background was to create kind of like a stained glass window Audra, I've never used embossed with a stencil before. Me neither. So I kind of wanted to play beforehand, make sure I got it working right, and it was actually really easy. So next I wanted to create kind of a stained glass window in the center of the card. So I used the, excuse me, a little bit of a mess here. I used the circle die from our basics die set, and I traced the center inside of it with a pencil. And then I just used a ruler to kind of create a rectangle inside of the circle to create a template to draw it to make the stained glass window. Next, once I created the template, I traced it onto a new paper. Next, I placed the template onto the window template onto the card base, and I kind of wanted it to line up in the center. Next, I used the stencil to kind of line up where I wanted this to kind of be in the same exact placement as the background. So I used some removable adhesive to kind of glue down the template. And then I lined it up. Let's see here. Right about there, looks good. Looks right. And then I placed this stencil back down on top of the 2 layers of cardstock. And then I just used a pencil to trace onto the window template. And you want to make sure that when you're tracing, you get both sides of the stencil line, not just one of the sides, so that you can have that nice white border in between your colored areas to make it look more like a stained glass look. Okay, so now we're going to move on to watercoloring the stained glass window. And today we're just going to watercolor with some thing you might already have in your stash, some distress inks. Audra, I love the stained window idea. Yeah, me too. I hope it turns out well. Hi, Tasha. Okay, so, sorry, give me a second to get straightened up here. And all you need is like a cup of water. And don't need that in the way. Woo. And then, so all you need to do, and then maybe a paper towel to dust off, to wipe off your brush. And I'm gonna use just like a number 2, a very thin brush to get into the small areas. And I used watercolor paper for this so that the water doesn't bleed, or the paint doesn't bleed too much. Okay, so now all I'm gonna do is I'm using this Waffle Flower Media Mat, and it's nice because it has these kind of like painted areas, like this little divots for the paint to sit in. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna press the ink cubes down into the paint areas here. So I'm using Candied Apple, Bonjour for the roses, Twisted Citron, and Mowed Lawn for the leaves. And I'm using, let's get a little bit more Mowed Lawn here. And then I'm using Tumbled Glass and Broken China for the negative space. Anybody have any questions so far about maybe the embossing technique with the stencil? And now I'm going to use some water and just spray into these little ink paint wells. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So you can see now we have our paint to watercolor onto our stained glass window. Ooh, make sure we don't drag any paint. So first I'm going to start by coloring the roses. And I'm going to start with the lighter, let's start with the darker color, the Candied Apple in the center of the flowers. So it's darker in the center and then lighter towards the outer petals. I asked earlier, but I know a few more people hopped on. Make sure you comment and say hi if you're here, and what are your plans for this weekend? I wanted to use watercolor to do the flowers instead of my normal, Copic marker techniques, because I feel like the watercolor will make this stained glass effect feel more real, and it's easier to add, so many different shades with watercolor versus with Copics you might be using 5 or 6 different markers, but with paints you can just create so many different shades with just 1 or 2 colors. Now I'm just going along the inside of some of these petals because I'm going to use water to drag the color out, so then the color is going to be a little bit lighter. And I am in no way, shape, or form a watercolor expert. I just like to try it every once in a while just to do something different. Let me see if I zoom in a little bit, if that's helpful. Oops. Okay, so we have our first rose petal finished. I think I missed tracing a line here in the center, but I'll use that as negative space. See, it's easy to miss. Oh, and I missed one here. See, it's easy to miss spots. So if you do, don't worry. I'll show you how to just kind of eyeball it. Let's go move on to this top flower up here. Any questions so far? Okay, now let's see here. Kind of eyeballing this one just because I want to add more color in here since I missed that spot. Okay. So right now I'm just going back and forth between the Candied Apple and the Barn Door Distress ink to kind of get the different shades of the rose going in. Okay, and then I think there's a rose over here, and I know it's kind of hard to tell where's a rose and where's a leaf, so it's easier to refer back to the stencil, kind of figure out, okay, where did I have this stencil lined up, and you know, it's easier to work with this kind of bigger picture versus a smaller area to try and figure out where these roses and leaves are located. Okay, I think that's all the rose areas. Anybody have any questions so far? I know it kind of looks crazy right now, but I promise it'll look really pretty. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the leaves. And I'm going to be using this Twisted Citron Distress ink and Mowed Lawn Distress ink for the leaves. Oh, I think I missed a rose color spot. Give me 1 second. This is part of the rose, I think. Okay. Back to leaves. Since you guys are being quiet, why don't you go ahead and tell me in the comments if you've tried watercoloring with distress inks before, or I guess any type of watercoloring. I know there's a bunch of different types out there, like watercolor pencils, just regular watercolors, liquid watercolor paints. There's so many different types out there. So I'm just going in with this twisted citron on half the side of the leaf because I'm going to use the mowed line on the other half to make the leaves look more two-toned. Okay. Tina, I rarely watercolor. Same. But sometimes, you know, you just need a break from your most used medium. At least that's how I feel recently. Okay, now moving on to the second half of the leaf. I missed that spot there. Go back in one more time with the twisted citron on this part here. Okay, there we go. Back to mowed lawn. And if you're watching the replay and you have any questions, feel free to comment them and I can get back to you on those. It's okay if you're not watching the live. I'll forgive you. It's Saturday. Who wants to be trapped inside on a Saturday? Unless you do have crafting plans, of course. Okay, I think, let me look one more time. I think that's all the leaf areas. The rest of it, I'm gonna use the blues to create kind of the negative space between the flowers. Okay. So I'm starting with Tumbled Glass. I'm gonna go like every other one with the Tumbled Glass. Okay. And I know I missed outlining something in this area, so I'm just gonna freehand it. Just add a little bit more color in there. There we go. Little too much color there. Okay, I think that's all the areas. Double check, make sure I don't miss any spots. Okay, what do you guys think? Now the nice thing about these waffle flower mats is that you can use, they are heat resistant, so you can use a heat gun and it won't damage your surface. I'm gonna lightly, excuse the noise. Now I'm going to set that aside to dry just a little bit more on its own. And while it's sat on the side, we can color up our princess image. Back to Copic markers. See, not too long of a detour from my favorite medium. I'm going to clean up my area really quick though. Be patient with me on this. It takes a little bit to clean up. These mats are clean up very easily. I just typically use baby wipes and paper towels to clean these mats up. Okay, now I'm going to pull this off and move it to the side. Now we're going to move on to coloring. And while I'm coloring, I'm going to set this discount code up here so that you can use it on your next shopping adventure on the Kindred Stamps website. Now that light's reflective. The Brienne Live 20 discount is good on the Little Town Life stamp set. And the stained glass rose stencil. So I know they've been in the store for a while, but maybe you were intimidated by the rose stencil because there were so many little intricate parts or things like that. And I know I haven't used it until now, and I've had it forever. So you know, make sure to add that to your next order. Okay, back to Copic Coloring. So I'm just starting by laying down a blanket coat of the E00 for her hands, which are a little hard to see when it's mixed in here with this rose and the dress. But now we have a blanket coat of the E00. Can move on to our darkest shade of E04. Let's see here. I don't think I need to zoom in anymore. If you want me to zoom in or anything, just leave a comment and I'll try and keep an eye out for that. But if you have any other questions about the watercoloring technique or the embossing technique, feel free to leave a comment about that as well. Okay. Maybe go behind your nose a little bit. Okay. Now we're moving on to E11. And I'm just tracing along the shadow line that I created with E04. E21 next. Their hands are so delicate and dainty. It's just like a little drop of color there. E00. And I'm going to finish coloring in the arms here and the neck area. And then I'm just going to spread the color out a little bit more on the face. Okay. E00. And then back to the E_0. Excuse me, I need a little bit of water. Okay. And we're going to do one more coat on the face. So going back in with the E04. Okay, moving on to the E11. Oops, wrong side. Okay. Oh, I know a fun question. Who ordered the new box? Underwater Buddies. I know they haven't shipped out yet, but they should soon. If only the box shipper got our life together. And if some of you know, the person who ships the boxes is usually me, so I wanted to take a break from that and do it live and do a little bit of coloring, because shipping all those boxes out is a little bit stressful. The state of my garage is kind of a disaster right now, because it has all the box parts, the filled boxes, boxes full of boxes that are ready to ship. It is a little chaotic. But they should be going out to you guys soon. Okay. And now I'm going to go in with R20 and add a little bit of pink to her cheeks. Tina, you didn't get it? Oh, I know you have so many Kindred Stamps products, so maybe you're running out of space like I am. I have so many. And then I'm going to go back over with the E00 and kind of blend that out a little bit. Okay. All right, finish the skin tone. Let's move on to the hair. I know I missed the lips. I'll come back in when I do the rose because I'm using some of the same colors there. So I'm going to use a base coat of E30 for the hair. And I'm going to leave this part blank because that's part of, it's kind of like the wrap around her bun to coordinate with the dress. At least in my head. Or it could be part of the bun. It's up to you. I just wanted to add a little bit more yellow to break up the hair color. Okay, I think that's all the hair parts. Okay, sorry, get those distractions off the screen. Next, moving in with E39, and I'm just gonna go run along the outside of the lines. And along the top of her hair here. In the center part. Excuse my dogs. They're very alertive whenever anything goes by. I don't know if you could hear their barking or not. They're pretty loud. I had to kick them out of the craft room while I did the live because they like to sit up here in my craft room because I'm on the second floor and watch out the window and bark from here. So did not need that level of distraction today. Next, we're moving on to E37. And just kind of going right over top of where I laid down the E39 color. Okay, next we're moving on to E35. We're just coming in and filling some more of that space, that lighter space. And last with E33, yes. Oh, no, I guess we could have some room for E31. Okay. I'm going to go back through one more time. Get a little bit more deep colors here on our hair. I like coloring her hair because it's a little bit easier than most, because I don't feel like I need to add the flicking technique in with all of these lines of her parts and her bangs and such, and the bun. Back to E37. Okay, on to E35. E33. And E31. Okay. I want to go back one more time with E37, I think, just to add more separation between these part lines. Okay. Across the top here. Okay. Hair is done. Now we're going to move on to the dress. Give me one second as I get my markers organized a little bit. Clear up some more desk space. Oop. Okay. All right, now we're back to business. So all we have left to color is the leaf on the rose itself, and the dress. And as and her lips. As I'm coloring up these pieces, go ahead and leave a comment and tell me what are some other techniques or some mediums or things like that that you would like to be seen used in a live. What's something maybe you're not sure of how to go about trying it, or you've seen somebody else do it and you want a little bit more explanation on how it was done, or you just want to see it done live. Just leave a comment and let us know what you'd like done so that I can come up with some more ideas for more lives. Or maybe there's just a certain color, a certain character you'd like to see colored within a live. That could be used to. Oh, hi, Timothy. Like to see you using embossing powder. Oh, well, just wait. Just wait. Actually, I lied. I already embossed the sentiment because I figured the watercoloring and the coloring was going to take so long. So maybe next time. But That would be a fun idea. Coming in with Y11. Okay, then back with Y000. Okay, and I'm gonna just go back through with the Y15 to add the shadows on the dress. And then Y11 to blend that out. Timothy, is there a certain color of embossing powder you'd like to see used? Or a certain technique? Okay, our dress is done. Put those away. Now moving on to the last little parts. I'm using YG17 for the little leaf. And then I'm going to use R37, R35, and R89 for the rose. Oh, one thing I wanted to share with you guys, I used to, a long time ago, which I might do again, is I used to create these little cards. The size is about half of an index card, so 3 by 2.5, because index cards are about 3 by 5. Anyways, I'd cut 2 pieces out. I'd cut out an index card, and I'd cut out 2 by 3.5 of my coloring paper, stamp the image on the coloring paper, color her, and then on the back, with the index card, I'd write the name, and then I'd put my skin tones, cheeks, and list all the colors that I use. But yeah, I found this really helpful, and then I'd stick it in the back of my stamp pocket where I keep the stamp so that, you know, I can always refer back to it. And then, okay, so back to the coloring of the rose. So 89. Let's go R37 here. And then on her lips, we're using R37 because I wanted them to be deeper red. And then R35 to finish up our image. Okay. And there she is. Now I'm going to fussy cut her out. And then Timothy, I would love to see you using different ways to use it. Yeah. Kind of like using the stencil and different ways to use the stencil? Sure. You can probably use embossing powder with a stencil to create an ink resisting area. That would be fun, right? Do you use heat and stick paste with Kindred Power? No, I'd probably just use I've never heard of that before, actually. I'd probably just use an embossing pad and just kind of, you know, stamp over top of the stencil. I've never heard of heat and stick paste. Just embossing pad. Kind of like the one that is now in the Kindred stamp store. I'm gonna have to look into that, Timothy. Heat and stick paste. I've had trouble getting my powder to stick. With an embossing pad? I know some people like to emboss twice, so they basically, you know, use their MISTI to heat emboss on the area once and then heat emboss the area again. See, I have the exact opposite problem. My powder likes to stay onto my paper. I have a hard time. I use one of those embossing buddies, but it's never perfect. Now I'm going to go around the outside, kind of create more of a black outline with a multi-line brush tool. So this is nice because when your fussy cut work isn't perfect, kind of hides those little mistakes for you. But make sure, I've many times I've accidentally gotten the brush pen part on my colored image and it's been pretty devastating. So I make sure to use kind of the thicker part and keep the tip of the pen away from the colored image. Okay. It's just a nice little tip. Okay, so now let's put the card together. Put my markers away. I like to keep my area clean as I go. Okay, so we have our embossed and ink blended base. One more time I'll show you. It's easier to see the embossing on this side, but we run it through a die cutting machine with a silicone mat underneath, and then the paper, the stencil in between the plates, create the embossing effect, and then used Fire Brick Distress Oxide ink to ink blend over top of the red cardstock to create the lighter tones on the flowers. Then we use the stencil again and traced with a pencil the open areas of the stencil onto some watercolor paper and use some distress ink to watercolor in those areas to kind of create a stained glass effect. So to finish the card, I went ahead and I used my scissors to cut out kind of an outline in some light blue cardstock to mat this watercolored area, watercolored stained glass window to place on our card background. So I'm going to use some liquid adhesive to glue that down. And I want to put it towards, got some tape runner gummies running loose, towards the center of the card. Press that in. Then I have some removable adhesive that I can just remove with my finger and then lay down some more liquid adhesive to permanently glue it onto the light blue mat. The mat isn't perfect. It's kind of wonky, but I think it's nice. Breaks up the backgrounds a little bit. Okay. And then last touches to add the characters and a sentiment, right? So I went ahead and I used the flag die cut from the Card Basics set, just this little piece, to die cut from some off-white paper. little sentiment flag, and then I used the new rose gold embossing powder to heat emboss the Bonjour sentiment. And probably going to go about here. And so I can just use some liquid adhesive, or I can put some foam tape down under this side here. I think I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive and glue that down after. And then I'm going to put the character right about here, I think. Here, maybe? Yes, that looks good. So just use a little bit more liquid adhesive. And ask one more time if anybody has any more questions. Anything I covered today. Okay. Or any questions for me in general. And then I already cut and scored a card base, so I'm just gonna use liquid adhesive one more time to glue card base onto the card front onto the card base. Okay, there you have it. Pretty fun, right? Different ways to use a stencil. So go over one more time the products that I used today. Sorry, that's the cat feeder going off. I apologize. So we used the stained glass rose stencil we used it 3 different ways. We used it to emboss, we used it to ink blend, and then we traced it to watercolor. And then I used 2 of the dies from the Card Basics die set. I used a circle to trace to create the stained glass window, and then I used the little flag die to create the sentiment flag. I used the rose gold embossing powder to stamp the Bonjour sentiment. And then I used the Little Town Life for the Bonjour sentiment and the princess. If nobody else has any questions, then I'm going to call it a live. Thank you so much for joining me. Once again, feel free to use the Brienne Live 20 code. It's good until tomorrow evening to get a discount on the Little Town Live stamp set and the stained glass rose stencil. Thank you.